Hi there, and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast, where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, Lauren. I only have one thing to ask from you this week. Even if you're listening on audio, at some point when you safely can, please go follow the YouTube channel. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed as well. I'm joined today by Jack Rosenthal, a 19-year-old entrepreneur and investor. He founded the Young Investors Club, LLC. He wrote the #2 best-selling book on teen investing, and he also wrote a top-selling book on teen entrepreneurship. Thanks for joining me, Jack.
Thanks so much for having me on, Lauren. Glad we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, me too. So this episode is brought to you by Steadily Insurance. Steadily covers so many different kinds of properties, everything from single family to multifamily, even vacant ones you're restoring, apartment buildings, condos, even manufactured homes. So get this, they also cover Airbnbs and VRBOs. If you rent property to others, support this podcast by clicking the link in the show notes and getting a quote today. Our goal for today is to make adulting a bit easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, as always, because managing money is a big part of adulting. Today, Jack, you and I are going to talk about entrepreneurship. But before we get into that, can you tell us just even how you started your first business?
Yeah, sure. So I know you read my book, Teen Entrepreneurship, Lauren. So I don't know if you remember. I don't even know if I talked about it in the book, but I'm pretty sure I did. So it's Cool Paper Planes, which I started when I was 8 years old. It has since it's coolpaperplanes.com. It's since had 70,000 people visit the website, I think just because it's a great domain name. And I basically started selling paper airplanes over the internet for $1 when I was 8, and I sold like 100 paper airplanes. That was my really first venture getting involved in business. Obviously, I've done a ton of other cool things since then, like the books and a business that I run now, and all kinds of stuff like that, and the Young Investors Club, etc. But that was my very first venture.
Would you change anything about how you started?
Um, Not really. I would say kind of something we were getting into before the podcast, like the behind the scenes is like, just start dirty and just start rough. Like, I mean, I think I started as early as you possibly can start when it comes to starting a business. So based on that, like, I don't know how much earlier or how much different I could have done it. I'm glad with that. I'm glad with where I started.
So, how did you go from being this entrepreneur to, selling paper planes to writing a book?
Okay, so very long path. We could spend 3 hours talking about that. I mean, that's like 10 years of my life, 8 to 18 years old, or 17 years old when I wrote my first book. But kind of the quick story is it started when I was a freshman in high school. I started something called the Young Investors Club. It started with one member, just me. And basically the way it worked is each kid would put in $1,000 and we collectively manage it in the stock market. So freshman year, we had 20 kids and $20,000 in the group. Junior year, we had 40 kids and $40,000 in the group. And by the time of my end of junior year, beginning of senior year of high school, we had close to 100 members and over $120,000 that the group was managing just based on like grown investments, that kind of thing, making us one of the largest that I'm aware of teen investing clubs in the country. And I did that all throughout high school. Then after high school, I was like, all right, I'm kind of done with this. It's for high school students. I'm going to leave the club, pass it on to someone else, have them continue to run it. But kind of as my parting gift, I wanted to write this book. And that's where I wrote my first book. And then I wrote, two other ones since then, Teen Entrepreneurship, which Lauren really loved. And she told me over Twitter she loved it. Hence the reason actually we're on this podcast together. So yeah, Teen Entrepreneurship, that's probably my favorite book. And that took like the most time to write. I wrote that my sophomore year, second semester, freshman year of college.
Okay, and you're in college now, right?
I am. Yeah, I'm calling you from my dorm room at Babson College. I'm a junior.
Okay, got it. Man, you've accomplished a lot. So you're a junior at 19. That sounds like you're a little ahead as well. Is that right?
So I recently turned 20. That's the thing. I like being a teenager. So I put my bio as 19 years old. I turned 20 in July, just to keep it totally accurate. So yeah, I'm not super young for being a junior, but still my birthday's in July, so I'm still on the younger side of my year.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So now you're in college. So let's talk about college real quick then. Lots of people, I think, fantasize, of course, the Mark Zuckerberg thing, right? Like, he went to college, but he dropped out or not going to college at all. You already knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur. Why do college at all?
Yeah. So people ask me that question. I've been on podcasts like since before I even started college, and people would ask that question, like, why are you even going to college? And kind of the thing is like college is not that much time. So I'm in it now, so I know. So it takes about 3 hours a day of class. And if you think about that, you have, 12 working hours or more in a day. You could basically still continue to work a full-time job if you wanted, just outside of your class schedule. So you could both go to college and do work. And I didn't really see there was a world where I had to do one or the other. Like my business wasn't taking up so much time for me, and I wasn't making like $1 million a year or several $100,000 a year. It would be so worth it just to spend every single second just on the business, growing the business. And what I could do is with the current income that I was making in high school, I could basically supplement that with going to college. So basically, I found a way to make both work together, and that's what I did.
Awesome. Got it. That's kind of like me. I have a job and then I have this on the side. So what's your major then?
So my major is finance. That's probably what I see myself going into right out of college. Probably investment banking. Yeah, I'll probably have a job in investment banking and then do all this personal brand book stuff on the side.
Okay. But I don't know they'll have time then, but I've never been in investment banking, but you know, good luck with that one.
Thank you.
I also majored in finance. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I liked business. Turns out I liked personal finance, but that wasn't an option. So here we are. So with entrepreneurs, I'm especially curious about this because you were an entrepreneur like so young. Do you think that they're born or made?
So I think they're born. I don't know. I hope I'm not stepping on your toes here, Lauren. I forget exactly what you say on Twitter all the time. I haven't read every one of your tweets, but I personally think they're born like, I mean, I'll give you a great example. So there's two kids from my hometown. They both happen to be entrepreneurs. Me and my best friend, we were best friends in high school. And he started a multi-million dollar e-commerce business, same age as me. And we're from the exact same town. We were the two kids that were always entrepreneurs in our high school. We were best friends because we were entrepreneurs. We had that in common. He started a multi-million dollar e-commerce business. I run this social media marketing business. And yeah, kind of together. But like you could see before we had any business, before we had any success at all, like you could see that was just our mission. Like we were just, that's the one thing we talked about. It's the only thing we cared about. It's like it's the main thing we just wanted to talk about with each other all the time. So you could, and that was from 6 years old. So you could just kind of, I think anyone could tell that like at that young age, it was just kind of a need in us to be entrepreneurs. That's how I see it.
Yep, we had the CEO advisor on the podcast. His name is Latan, and he had a successful business and there was a successful exit. And so he's on his second entrepreneur. And he basically, I think he said that they're born. I said it's almost like you can be born majoring in it, but maybe you can learn to like minor in it.
Mm.
Um, my parents tell me I'm an entrepreneur, and I've never thought of myself that way. And I certainly wasn't this entrepreneur from like a child, right? I was going to go to college and get the job and do all that. So I don't know that you're necessarily stepping on my toes with that
Okay.
answer.
Because people ask me that, I think someone asked me that on like a different podcast. They're like, no, I just teach on my platform. You can transform into an entrepreneur. I'm like, oh boy, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but glad
Yeah,
to see on the same page there.
I think I don't know how natural it was for me, but something that I've noticed now that I've created Adulting is Easy and my vacation rental business, and my husband is growing and a part owner of this engineering firm. So entrepreneurship is kind of a big part of our life, at least at this season in our lives. We talk about it all the time. And we've realized that we're starting to kind of see opportunity everywhere. And there was some sort of mindset shift that occurred from almost like a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Do you think entrepreneurs just kind of think a little differently,
Yeah,
see
like
opportunity?
I kind of all have to like turn my brain off because like literally every single day I come up with an idea and so few of them like I can execute on. Like literally today I came up with an idea. I'll just tell you what it was. I'll pitch it to you. So it's like you know how like for big TV shows they sell the merchandise like Game of Thrones, they like have a huge business selling the merchandise. I was thinking like what if you go to like some of those less popular movies, maybe like the top 1,000, go to the bottom list, the top 1,000 movies, and like basically do like a licensing deal that you're going to sell their merchandise, then open up like a Shopify, Etsy, eBay, Amazon store, and usually exclusive dealer of like, I don't know, 100 or so movies merchandise. I bet that could be like a very successful business. Anyway, so just ideas like that I come up with every day. But okay, how are you going to go execute on that? Now I have to go get the licensing agreements, which is going to be super hard, and then sell the merchandise and do set up the factory, etc. But anyway, coming up with ideas, I come up with them all the time.
I had an idea today too, and I don't even remember what it was, but it was something like that. And then you're like, are there barriers to entry enough that competitors couldn't easily like flip a couple switches and do it, enter the market? And meanwhile, I'm all the way in. And yeah, so I'm starting to really think like that. But I'm telling you that didn't click for me until maybe 5 years ago when I was like 28 years old. So you've written books, Jack. What about reading books? Are there any books that you recommend to people?
So yeah, I don't read like well, again, I don't want to step on your toes here. I don't read like the blue chip entrepreneur books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, or like I don't know. There's like the five most common ones that like everyone read. I don't really enjoy those just as much, just because I feel like they're more like meant for the masses. I like to read like books by super successful people, but like they're not really as well known. So one is like Sam Zell's book, Am I Being Too Subtle? I read that one. I really like that book. He started his business in college just like me, started buying up apartments in college. I think he had an apartment management business, and he said something like, I mean, you could just tell these people are born with it. He said by the end of college, he was like managing 1,000 apartment units just as like a senior. And I mean, it's just crazy that he's able to accomplish that much at a young age. And obviously, you could tell he's going to go on to be eventually like a billionaire. And yes, I read his book, really like that book. Steve Schwartzman book, Whatever It Takes or What It Takes, really great book as well.
I'm writing that down so I can add them to the show notes. Those are really good examples. And I like that too. I like a lot of different genres of books. I've certainly read like the personal finance ones because I always want to know if I can recommend them to people. I love like the business scandal-y books like Bad Blood about Theranos, or I just read a book about Peter Thiel,
Oh yeah, zero
GE,
to
all
one.
those. It wasn't Zero to One.
Oh,
I
okay.
forgot what it's called. And I'm not at home. If I was at home, the book would be right behind me. With your books actually are at home. I'm at one of
Thank
my
you. I appreciate you putting them up on your bookshelf. It means a
of
lot.
course. Actually, let me rephrase. I have one of your books on the bookshelf. My sister has your other one in her dorm at the University of Florida, which is represented right here as well. So I'm at one of my Airbnb units, everybody. I should have mentioned this up top. Sorry, my lighting's not great. I'm not at home for this. Um, okay, so anyway, so I digress. This is not about me. This is about you. Um, so you're a kid, I would say. I mean, I know you're an adult, and my sister, she's 19. She does this thing where she's like, oh, I'm an adult now, because I'm 18. But for people that are like me, I'm 32, almost 33 years old, or for my parents' generation, you are a kid. How do you interact with the adult world, get them to, and like even get them to take you seriously?
Yeah, well, like my main thing I lead with is that I'm a kid, and that's kind of like niche. like, like how, like I'm like, all right, how am I gonna get someone to, be interested in me? I'm like, well, I could tell them, I run this club, but okay, tons of adults run clubs, or I could tell them I wrote a book. You know, how many adults have written books? A million. Okay, so you got to get their first attention by like telling them you're a kid. But then kind of other things I do, like, okay, after your kid. All right, fine. I know children. I have a niece or whatever. Okay, so how are you going to differentiate yourself after that? Well, then things like starting the Young Investors Club, writing the books, they're kind of like accolades that give you like an automatic kind of separation from the group, and like that's usually how I'm able to get adults' attention.
Okay, cool. And would you say that adults have things that they can learn from kids?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Like one of our niches when I was running the Young Investors Club is we mostly bought stocks in companies that the kids were buying from themselves. So like if we played a lot of video games, for example, one kid would like be an expert in video game stocks, then we'd go try and like that was like our niche, try and find, stocks in terms of things that like Gen Z was buying, and that was kind of like our angle. That's how we pitched. We were better. I mean, our returns ended up being like 10 or 12%, pretty in line with what the market was making at the time, but nevertheless that was kind of our angle. So yeah, I would say there's definitely things that adults can learn from kids, but I'd say definitely much more so the other way around.
Gotcha. So if there are listeners out there who have been, they have this entrepreneurial idea, maybe they're not sure about it, how can you encourage them to get going on it?
um let's see. Okay, so one of the things that's like my main go-to quote from the teen entrepreneurship book that I wrote that everyone like points out is one of the things I say is don't start a business plan. And this is a huge thing. This is contrary to everything that I was taught in high school and even college entrepreneurship class is like, oh, first you start with a business plan. And I've started a bunch of businesses. I'd say like 8 have failed and 2 have been successful, but the 2 successful ones made up for all the failed ones.
Sure.
And the biggest thing that I learned is like the day after you start the business has already changed from like where you thought it was going. So there's literally no point in writing a business plan down. That's number one. Number two, like you're just going to set your expectations wrong. Like if you try and stick to it too much, like like so many businesses that are very successful, like kind of pivot. Like Netflix would be a big example I'm thinking of right now. They started with mailing DVDs. If they had been so stingy to their business plan, oh, we're going to be the best DVD mailer, they'd be nothing today. So like every single
Like
day, businesses are
like
pivoting.
Blockbuster, right?
Like Blockbuster,
They stuck to
they
their
stuck
model.
to
They had the
their
opportunity to buy Netflix,
or
right?
50 million or something like that.
Yeah,
Crazy. And they
bad
did
idea. Yep,
like
because they stuck to their business
because
model.
they stuck to their business plan. So yeah, for those reasons and a couple others, I listened to the book. Definitely don't do business plan. Yeah, I mean, literally just launching the idea. Another thing that like me and Lauren were talking about, and not to go so much off what Lauren. Anyway, this one of the things that I say is like you shouldn't invest too much in a business unless you're like an expert in that business. You should start by dipping your toe in and then like start investing more and more. So like for example, I'll give you an example. So I have this marketing business, and this one guy, not to shout out bad on a client, but I think a mistake he made was he was launching a Kickstarter campaign and he bought all his inventory up front before he sold any products for the Kickstarter campaign. And I think it cost him like $10,000 that he's putting in inventory. And I was thinking like it would have been so much smarter if he bought one model product, one prototype, and just put the $10,000 in marketing and tried to sell as many products as you can. Because not to mention, years later, he wasn't able to sell a lot of the inventory that he purchased. That's like a big mistake I see people making is they're like, okay, I got this idea. I'm going to go full force of the idea because that's like what all the gurus online teach. Like, okay, once you got an idea, you got to commit to it. Just put your whole life savings into it. Totally wrong. You should dabble in it a little bit, figure out once what works. Then once you have like a marketing plan that's working, okay, then you could put more money into it. But 9 out of 10 times, the first thing you try is going to fail. So you got to kind of maneuver around until you find something that works.
And don't be as scared of failing, right? Because that's learning. I've learned so much doing this podcast and doing the Adulting is Easy Twitter and things like that. But even the business model of Adulting is Easy, which, if you can call it that, right? When I started, I was going to do the blog, and then I really got into the podcast, and I really was very into the podcast, and I still am, of course. But now Twitter has grown a lot. And now I'm part of this thing called Cashflow University, where I'm teaching people how to do short-term rentals, and I'm doing short-term rental coaching and some personal finance coaching. And so the business has expanded. So it didn't do it the very first day, like you were talking about. It took a couple of years, but you kind of have to, I think, in a lot of cases, be ready to kind of go where the business is going to take you, and also where people are wanting you to go. I may and then I may in 3 months from now be like, you know what, I can't do coaching anymore. I can't do hourly coaching. I don't have time. I need to do group coaching, or I'm cutting the coaching altogether. I don't know where this is going to head, but there's this idea of kind of, you need to be a little bit maneuverable. And also I still have a full-time job, right? Could I quit it? Is the real estate paying for my life? Absolutely. Is Adulting is Easy making me money? A bit, right? So I could, but I'm not a, burn the boats person. This idea that you take your Navy to an island and you burn the boats, because you know what? You're going to take over that country, or you're going to die. And, that's why I like that advice, because
And
it's
all the
personally what
stories
I've done.
about the people that die don't never make it back home.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
The
maybe
people
they
that
get
did burn the
medals.
boats, yeah, then they get killed by the Indians that are naturally there. The story of them dying never never makes it all the way back.
Exactly. And that's not me. I like that. Also, Financial Samurai joined the podcast recently. And he said kind of along the same lines. He has this really cool kind of plan laid out in his book. Buy This, Not That is what the book is called. And it talks about, here's what you need to do: build your thing while you have your job, exit your job. He's like, negotiate a severance. That's his big thing. And then, exit and do your I think he calls it your X factor, right? Then go do that. So that's kind of interesting. So anyways, those were the questions that I had for you. Is there anything you want to add, Jack, before we wrap up?
Yeah, let's see. So we covered, and I feel like we haven't really talked about investing too much. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to make it more entrepreneurship focused podcast or investing? That's up to you, Lauren.
Yeah, I was leaning towards entrepreneurship.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right, no worries. I guess like one thing that I'd say like on the investing side is like, so I take all the money that I make doing entrepreneurship and I invest it. And like that's been a pretty useful way to grow wealth at a young age. And like kind of it does two things. One, like if you have money in a bank account, like you're going to spend it because like you just money in a bank account gets spent. For some reason, whenever I leave money in a bank account, it always like just disappears. But when I put in an investment account, it's like, okay, now it's a lot harder to pull out of that, put into your bank account. So one thing, it just is like a forced savings account. And then the second thing I like about it is that obviously it grows and you can invest in it. This 10 years that I've come up and been born has been like some of the best 10 years to invest in anyone's life. So I
Of
got
course,
really,
yeah.
of course, in the last year, not so much, but the 9 years leading up to that, a lot. So yeah, that's been really helpful in terms of helping to grow some wealth and have some more stuff to talk about in the books.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point. You can take your money that you have in a business, and you can put it back in the business. I think it is a good idea to diversify a little bit. We see that even with the biggest entrepreneurs that we know of, right? Like Bezos or Elon Musk. They don't have everything in Amazon anymore. They don't have everything in Twitter or Tesla, not Twitter, Tesla or SpaceX, right? Like
I wish
they
Twitter. I wish Musk would have bought Twitter, but that's me.
almost. So yeah. So they do that, right? So I think that's a really good point and a really good ad for listeners. So Jack, why don't you tell people how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for listening today. You can find my books by typing my name, Jack Rosenthal, on Amazon. Pretty much everything will come up there. I wrote a crypto book too. I didn't send Laura that one, but also have that in the works.
It would be lost on me.
Yeah, I know that I can't send her like, oh, hey, Lauren, here's that 100,000 words. Go read all this. So just type in my name, Jack Rosenthal, find me. And the new thing I'm trying to do, which I'm copying Lauren. In fact, the way that I found her was Twitter. Is I'm trying to grow my Twitter following, Jack Rosenthal 29. So follow me on Twitter. I'm sure a lot of people listening are coming from Twitter.
Yeah, that'll be true. All right, Jack Rosenthal. What was the number?
29.
29. Okay. Did you change that?
Yeah, it used to be
Okay.
like,
A
yeah,
ton of numbers. Okay. Good. I'm glad you did that. That would
I
have been
know,
my like
I
number one recommendation.
because I went on my last podcast and I had to like go find the number. Oh boy, I better change this.
Yes, that's good. I approve. I approve of aligning your branding. Um, so everybody, you can follow me on Twitter at Adulting is Easy. Like I mentioned, I started the YouTube channel. Please make sure you subscribe there. I'm also on Facebook. You can email me at realadultingiseasy@gmail.com. I am looking to join other personal finance podcasts as a guest. So if you have an in, please let me know. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Jack and I have made adulting a little easier for you. How do I stop it? There we go.